Hey everybody. So for this week, while I'm working on refining some of the and figuring out some of the animations, for that little previous stream with the torch, I was thinking of doing something interesting, something that I've posted around in Slack, and it was kind of a continuous progress on it. But I think it's good enough to show you kind of the simple version of this. And what it is, it's this surveillance camera, where it doesn't necessarily have to be a surveillance camera. It can also be a turret, right? So let's show what currently is there. So let me see which one it is. I'm starting a bunch of test projects here, and which one to pick. So let's take a look at this one, and this is what hopefully we'll be able to achieve by the end of the stream. So once you jump into game mode, as you can see, you have the surveillance camera. I have created a kind of just a model for it to kind of give it a little bit of a better reference. So the camera is panning left to right within a certain angle, and what happens if it detects you? Right now it's actually just casting a simple ray forward, and this could be probably improved forward. I just need to do some research on it. But once you run into it, as you can see, it detects you. The light starts flashing red, and at that point it's just gonna track you around. And since I mentioned that it could be a turret, it would probably behave the same way, and at the same time also firing some bullets. So as you can see, it tracks you around, but you don't want to, maybe you want to get out of its range of detection. So if you go past a certain distance, let's see how this works. So I thought I built it. Let me take a look at this real quick. Because I actually just had it tested right before the stream, so let me try and start the debugger here. Trying to figure out why the behavior that I was having is not really showing. So we've seen the detection and tracking around. So let's see if I get out of its range, what I'm hoping for, and here we go. So what it's going to do is going to sit for another 5 seconds into that position where it last found you, and then it's going to go back into its searching mode. So this is going to involve implementing some states for this. So one of them is this searching right now, then found. So once it finds you, it knows that it can go into tracking. So now it's tracking you. So once you move out of its range, which right now it's 10 meters, the length of the vector that it casts that ray is 10 meters, it goes out of that and back into its search mode. And there's some a little bit of interesting things doing with the light, so that it flashes and then it turns to white. And we've already have some of that groundwork in place with the flashlight that we've implemented. So we're going to make use of that. Okay, and so with the presentation showcase out of the way, let's actually jump into doing some of the work. So let me just move some of my things around, and I need to see where am I going to place some of these things. This cheat sheet of mine, I guess. Okay, so let's fire up our stream example here. So I've already imported those models, those 3D assets into my project. So those are going to be up to you to do. So that's so first of all, let's actually just make a little bit of light in the level, so we can see what's going on. Okay, so let's fire up our solution. And this is where the interesting part comes in, C++. Yay! Okay, solutions, Windows, and game solution. There we go. So a few of the things that we're going to have to create first is, let's see, where did I place them? So we have kind of a good place for this. It looks like I've placed them into components. And well, not necessarily the best place, I'm guessing. Hey Oscar, welcome. Yeah, happy to be streaming. So yeah, today, I don't know if you've seen, we're gonna try and do a that little surveillance camera slash turret. So let's get to it. All right. So what did I say I wanted to start with is actually creating the components. So I'm going to create them in here because they're pretty available to me. So let's add a new item, and that will be a C++ header file. Always make sure that whenever you create them this way, to browse to your directory where you want to place them. So we have code and we have components. So we're going to place them right in here. So select this. And for this one, I'm going to be creating so 4 different files, 2 C++ files and 2 header files. So one of them is going to be my surveillance component. Surveillance component. And this is going to be the C++. So add that, and let's add the header file as well for that. And now we have the path already set, so I don't need to worry about that. So surveillance component header file. Okay, so this is what this is going to be. This is going to be the component that holds and actually does the work to cast the ray and detect if the entity that it hit, in this case, is going to be a living entity. So usually living entities will be your player, your non-player characters, and you know, for now I'm just going to keep it simple with just the living entity. Later on we can improve on this to actually make sure that it's just the player and not, you know, something else, maybe a you know, a pet or a dog or whatever, you know, other things that have a living status. Okay, so we have the surveillance component header file and the C++. So now let's add the actual entity that's going to be containing this component, right? So for that, I'm going to add another item, and again the path is all set. So I'm going to call this cameras. So let's actually put it, I'm not sure if I should put it sort of surveillance camera or surveillance parent. I'm going to name it camera for now. Let's call it surveillance camera so we know what it's about. Alright, so we have the C++, and now let's add the header file. So the reason I'm doing it like this is because so for once, the surveillance component is going to be, like I said, the item that's going to cast the ray. Is going to determine if it intersected an item that is, you know, an item that is a living entity. But then that is going to be added to I kind of misspelled that, so let's see if we can rename this surveillance. And then the surveillance camera, this is the actual item that you're going to be able to drag into your level and position around things, or, you know, position. And this item is going to be in charge of doing the movement. So you know, you're going to do the panning left to right, then the tracking, and along what this is also going to be in charge is, it's also going to this we're going to add the flashlight, or flashlight component that we've previously done. So since this is going to be moving around, the flashlight is going to follow. So hopefully that makes sense. Alright, so let's name these. Hopefully, I think I named it right this time. Okay. So let's get to it. What I'm going to start with is actually the surveillance component. So, which is, like I said, is going to do the kind of the raycasting, and is going to set the geometry for our actual camera. And I believe, yeah, that's going to be it. It doesn't do a whole lot. But you can, extend it. You can add stuff to it, maybe like a spark effect when it reaches the farthest that it can go to one side or the other side. So, possibilities are quite endless. Alright, so let's get to it. We're going to start first. Actually, one thing that I don't want to forget is we need to add this to the CMake list. So whenever that we build this, it gets included in the build. Okay, so let's see, where do we want to place it? We're under the components filter here. So I think we can just place it right here. Yeah, I think that could be a good place. So let's do components / and this is going to be surveillance component.c++, and we need to do the same and add the header. And the header right there. Okay, so I think we should be good on that end. A part of this is I'm going to be doing some copying and pasting because we've seen these quite a bunch of times, and we don't need to go over them again. So let's take a look at one of our previous components. So I think we can let's see if we do destroyable components, and we'll just copy our usual header, and we'll start off with the surveillance camera. So a couple of the things that I'm going to be creating for the surveillance camera is actually the surveillance component. Let's see, I just don't want to repeat some of the, because like I mentioned earlier, we want to have a state of the camera knowing that, okay, right now I'm searching, right, so I'm panning left to right, but now the ray hit intersected a player, so now I know that I need to go into the tracking state. So now I'm going to track the player around. Oh, the player is 10 meters farther than how far I can cast my ray. So at that point, I'm going to need to go back into my searching state. So that's why I'm saying we're going to need to have some states for this. But one thing that I was looking at my test project here, I want to see what I've placed where. So I'm thinking that those states are going to go into the actual container that is going to hold these components. So it's going to be the surveillance camera. So the surveillance component, like I said, is just going to do the raycast. So let's do that. So we're going to start off, like I said, this part I'm just going to do a little quick copy and paste. You've seen this many a time before. So we have your standard boilerplate component creation here. Nothing different, nothing special. So first thing that we're going to do is just do our quick implementation of these, and let's see, we can just select all of them, right click, and quick actions and refactorings, and create declaration definition. And you'll see all these got created, and if you go to look here, you'll see all your stuff. Okay, so we have part of this, but a few other things that we're going to need. So one thing that I've made use lately is a Boolean that is tracking if you're in game mode or not. So basically if you're in the editor. So this is going to be helpful because we don't want these items to do the same thing while in editor as they're doing in game mode. Like for example the panning. So we don't want that. So this is going to be used for our update function. So is game mode, and we need another boolean to determine if our ray hit the player. So found player. Okay. Now another thing that we will probably need is let's take a look here. We're going to need to pass in the geometry, because maybe you want to change the geometry. So, you know, from in my case, the surveillance camera to maybe a turret, or you know, anything else. So let's take a look at this. I have my path, and this is going through schematics, so it's available to you in the editor. All right. We have that, and let's see, do we need anything else? I think that might be good for us to start. Let's see, I have a vector here for, okay, so, and then another one last member variable, which is the hit location. So wherever it like intersected or found the player, right, we need to be able to track that and, you know, pass it along further down the road. Okay, so let's see, do we have any errors? And they have something here. Oh, where do we have this thing? It's complaining somewhere around here, but I can't. Oh, yeah, that might do it. Semicolon. Okay, so we have our surveillance camera header file built up. Okay, so let's get to our functions in the C++ file. Okay, so in here, a few of the things that we're going to need, and one thing that I actually forgot, and it's important that I need to add to the header file, is, let's see, we have it right here. So there's a couple of things that I forgot to add, and these are needed, right? So one of them is going to be our raycast. So that's going to be, just going to paste it here, so void raycast. And to this function, I'm passing a couple of vectors, because the raycast function needs the direction that is going to cast the ray and the position. So where am I going to cast the ray from, and what direction am I going to cast the ray on? Okay, so this is going to be a vec3 direction and another vec3 for position. And I think the other thing that we can add is also a reset. So if you've seen previously, we've used reset to you know, set the geometry, physics, and things like that. Okay. Yes, and Oscar just mentioned raycast also needs a length. For the purpose of this, I'm actually gonna just use a hard-coded value for now. But you can always have that as a schematic variable. So I'm not entirely sure if I have anything handy for that. I can't remember if it's a schematic namespace int or. But as I said, for now I'm just going to use a hard-coded value. And actually, let's pass it in as a parameter, so we can extend it, or you know, if you pull the code from my repository, you can extend it and add that schematic, probably int or some value, and pass an actual value to it. So let's do and this is going to be a float, and let's call it length, because ray length maybe. So we're going to make use of this. That was a great point, Oscar. Rather than just have it, you know, completely hard-coded just into that, at least this way we can pass it as a parameter. So create declaration definition. Oh, okay, now that's saved already. Okay, let's get to this, and we have all the function names. So now we need to add functionality to all of this. So some of these, like I said, are just going to be copy and pasting. You've seen this previously. Okay, so one of them is just going to be our schematic registration stuff. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's jump into some of these. So initialize. In initialize, we're just going to call reset, since reset is going to do kind of some of the heavy lifting, you know, setting the geometry, you know, physics or what have you. Okay. Another thing that I wanted to add to this, and something that I've noticed is that whenever you create a component to an entity through code, okay, so yeah, Oscar mentioned something really, a really good thing to mention here is that, so let me just pull this up so you can see. As generic function code, it could be also good to have which kind of physical surfaces are hitting, but it's, and that's fine. This is what we're going to do. We're going to just do for the living entity for now, and like Oscar is saying, in further implementations, we're just going to target the player and not just random NPCs. But from a gameplay standpoint, maybe you want to do that. You know, kind of. Okay, you know, we're gonna throw this little critter, or you know, we're gonna kind of target them to walk in the camera range of view. So then, if the camera tracks that little animal, you know, you can go by it, or you know, things of that matter. You know, that's why gameplay development is so cool. But one of the things that I wanted to add to initialize is this component flag. So one thing that I've noticed is that if you create the components within the entity, so like for example, we're going to have the surveillance component that's going to create this camera, the surveillance camera. So every time you save, and whenever the editor loads, it tries to create another one of these components. So in order to not have that happen, just this this component flag needs to be set. So there's that. Okay, so now let's get into this get event mask. And again, this is I'm doing this on 5.4, so things are going to slightly change once 5.5 comes out. So just your regular start game, update, reset, and event collision. I'm having the event collision just because you know, maybe in the future there could be some more improvements, or maybe other functionality added with the collisions. Okay, so with that said, let's jump into our process event. So process event is going to have something interesting here. So this is where that Boolean for the game mode comes in. So let's add some of that stuff in here. So we have the entity event reset, and then we're going to have the update. But in reset, what we're going to be looking for is if event dot and param 0. So if this equals 1, then what we know is that we've jumped into game mode. So then we need to do an is game mode equals true. Otherwise, and underscore is game mode equals false. Okay, so once we're done with this, should be it for this case. So this way, we know when we're in game mode versus not in game mode. Just, you know, in the editor and we're like editing things. Okay, so we have this case out of the way. Let's quickly do a break, and let's jump into the next case. In the next case, what we're gonna be doing, this would be our event entity update, and for this, we're not gonna really do anything, but we need to write that in. So just maybe we're gonna do something in the future, and this is where our and underscore is game mode, and then we're going to do game mode stuff in our update, and we can break out of that. One last thing that we can add, We're not going to implement all of them, but it's going to be our, I'm just going to copy this here, our entity event start game. So if we have a start game event, then we can do a reset. Okay, so once that is all done, we can break out of this as well and end our switch. So we have the cases that we need. So since we've just used reset, let's take a look at reset and add that in. So again, just this is going to be a copy and paste for some of these things, and we'll quickly go over them. So in reset, first thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that this variable mFoundPlayer is set to false, right? Because when we start the game, the camera is just going to be panning around and it's going to be trying to find a player. So after that, we just get a component slot, and we'll free it, we're going to physicalize it, and we'll load our geometry that we've set in our header file. So that being, oops, that's not it, it's right here, our surveillance camera. So once that is all set, you can do some physicalization. Like I said, this is just some boilerplate stuff that I copied and pasted, so probably you don't really need this at this point, at least these lines here. Okay, so we have the reset. Now let's actually add some code to our reflect type, so that way we can make things available for us in the editor. So again, this is things that we've seen before, just your regular stuff for the schematic. So you know, we have the editor category, the surveillance component, its properties. And for now, the properties are just going to be this this file path. Okay, let's also add some of this stuff in serialize. It's again nothing that I've went into searching too much, so hopefully in the near future I'll try and look into it a little more. So that's why I like to have stuff in here. And now to raycast, and this is the fun part. So or at least until we actually get something going. So first of all, I mean, the thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to you know, create our ray hit. So ray hit, and we'll call it hit. Very intuitive. Okay. So a couple of the things that we need to, another thing that we need to do for this is actually set the flags. So that's just going to be, and we've done this before, static const unsigned, this is an unsigned int, and ray flags. So we're going to need, and I'm just going to copy this because it's a kind of a long, there's just a couple of them. Okay, so what do we need to stop at, right? Okay, so let's actually cast the ray. So in order to do that, pretty simple. It's going to be like just a global environment, arrow, p physical world, and ray world intersection. So what are we going to pass to this? First of all, we need to pass it the position, right? So that's going to be our position from the parameter passed. And then we need to cat the direction, right? So that's going to be our direction, but along with this, we're going to pass how far in that direction we're going to cast this ray. So that's going to be times our ray length. Okay, so once these are out of the way, what are we going to try and detect? So we're going to detect entity living. And then we need to pass our ray flags. Ray flags. and the reference to our hit point, so hit. And then what we're going to need is, this is just a how many hits, so we got 1. And then the physical entity, so this is going to be mp entity get physical entity. Okay. So now that we're casting the ray, let's see how do we go about and detect what we hit. So first of all, let's see if we hit something. So hit dot, oh, not jump, but hit dot p. What am I doing here? Hit dot p collider. I guess the J and the H are too close together. All right, so hit dot p collider. So what we're going to do here is we're going to get the collision entity, right? So we're going to do I physical entity, and this is going to be a pointer to a p hit entity. Let's actually name it like that, hit entity. And this is going to be hit dot collider. Okay, so now that we have that, let's get the entity from physics, right? At this point, we know that we're only gonna be filtering for these entity living types of items. So let's do I entity. And so this could be probably useful. I'm just going to have this in here, though, even though I'm not using it. But this could probably be useful once we are actually going to do a filtering based on if it's the player or if it's a non-playing character or any other sort. So for now, I'm just going to have this in here. It's not going to be doing much. P entity system. And get entity from physics, and p hit entity. Okay, so at this point we've already known that we hit something, and we know that that hit is going to be an entity living because that's what we're going for. And what do we need to pass on as known things? We know that we hit the player, so we found the player. So mFoundPlayer equals true. And the other thing that we need to pass along is the hit location, because we need the camera to orient itself to where that player is. So hit location is going to be hit.point. Okay. So with that being said, I believe that should be pretty much it for our surveillance camera. Now let's get into our surveillance component that is actually going to be doing, the rotation, doing the little flashy lights, and tracking the player around. In here, just like before, I'm going to be doing some of the copying and pasting of headers. And one thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need a couple of enums. So these enums are going to help with one of them, cam rotation. So this is going to be a rotate left and a rotate underscore right. So what these are going to do, they're going to be kind of like the states of the camera. So my current state is rotating left, so I'm panning left. I'm getting to the point where I can't pan any further. I'm going to go into the rotate right, so then I'm going to be panning, rotating right, and then rotating left, and the cycle continues. Okay, and then the other one that I'm going to need to be adding here, and let's see if I'm actually missing something. So the other one is going to be another enum of camera search. So this is how the camera behaves, right? So we have a state where it's searching, we have another state where we found a player, so which is found. We have a state of tracking. We have a state of resetting. That is that little 5-second window where the camera is kind of you went out of its range, but the camera is still pointing kind of towards your last known location. So then it has 5 seconds, or at least I've set it to 5 seconds, where it's sitting in that position, and then it goes back into search mode. Okay, so with these states out of the way, these enums, let's get some of the just the regular component stuff out of the way. So I'm just going to copy and paste this real quick. You know, construct, destructor, and our just functions that we've seen before. So let's go ahead and do the right-click, quick actions and refactorings, and create declaration definition. Okay, I think it's trying to save this window. Okay, so once we have the reset, just like before, what we're going to do is I'm going to have a boolean m_is game mode. Okay, and we're going to pass it our schematic stuff for its base. So in my case, the base of this is going to be like the camera mount. So if you think of the camera, and I'm going to show you once we go into the engine, you have the camera element, and then you have its mount. So the mount that it kind of can rotate around, or you know, in real world type thing. So this is what this entity is going to hold. So we're just going to pass that in. Let's see, what else do we need that we're going to be making use of? So first of all, we need to declare a couple of these. So one of them is going to be our cam rotation, and the other one is going to be cam search. So let's close this first so I don't forget. So we're going to have a cam rotation, which I've named it m_cam rot, and then cam search. So cam search, and this is going to be m_cam search. Very intuitive. Okay. Along with these, one thing that we're going to need, just like because I mentioned before, is we're going to need to create these two components. So one of them is going to be for the flashlight, and we've done that previously, right? We already have it. So we can just create that here. So we're going to have a C flashlight, and I think first of all I need to include it. So let's see. I'm just going to get my current paths because I need to have those in here. So a couple of the other things that we're going to include is, like I said before, surveillance component that we've just made, and actually this one we named it surveillance camera. And then we have the flashlight, and I was trying to do something with the torch. It didn't really end up very well, so I'm just going to remove this from here. So, but we have the flashlight in there. So let's actually create those 2 pointers. So we have a C surveillance component, and did I name it? No, it's kind of a little bit unintuitive. I don't really like that. So let's do let's rename this to surveillance camera component. It's a little bit I don't really like that, so let's take a look at this and call it surveillance camera component. So we're going to do it in the current document, at least for now, replace them all, and we're going to need to do the same thing in our surveillance camera here. And this one's actually not that much, so we can just do it real quick. Okay, so there's that. Let's see, are we having any more issues here? We are not. Let's see, why is this complaint here? Surveillance camera component. Oh, and we need to, that's there, it's good. Surveillance component. Let's see, what are we missing here? So let's call this the surveillance camera component. Alright, so component, what am I missing that this is complaining about? Oh, is it something in the surveillance here that I'm missing? I'm seeing closing quote. I do have a closing quote there. Oh, this is weird. Did I? Surveillance camera component. Did I misspell something here? Component. Well, this is weird when something like this happens. Huh. That was really weird. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe because I didn't save the C++ file. I was acting up. Okay. Well, that looks good. So let's go back to our surveillance component header. So let's actually name these like that, and we have a surveillance camera component, and this is going to be a pointer, and we're going to call this m underscore p surveillance camera component. All right. And so the other component that I wanted to create is the flashlight. So we can set the whenever it's searching, it's just going to be that solid white, and then when it finds you, it turns into that flashing red. And once it can't see you anymore, goes back to its regular color. All right, so that's going to be a C flashlight component. Again, just a pointer. And m underscore p flashlight component. Okay, so we got most of the pieces in place. Let's see if there's anything else that we might be missing. Okay, so another variable that I had here is an integer called rotator. So what this is going to do, depending on the current state of this, I'm going to be setting this to plus or -1. So once it reached the farthest left angle that it can go, let's say this is +1, right? So it's going to the right. I'm going to set it to -1, so then when you set the rotation, it knows that, okay, now I'm going to have to revert it and rotate it the other way. So there's that. Let's see, do we need anything else? I believe, let's take a look. I had quite a bunch of extraneous stuff in my test code, so I don't want to add that in and confuse things that when it's not needed. Okay, so let's take a look and see if I'm using some of these things around here. It doesn't look like it. So I think I think the only thing that we need to add is going to be that timer. You know, so if you remember from some time ago, I mentioned that we want to have a timer. So whenever it detects you, it's going to stay, you know, point at you for a certain amount of time, and then it's going to go back to searching. So for that, I'm just going to have a float timer, and I'm going to I'm going to leave it as is. I'm not going to initialize it just yet. Okay. And let's see, do we need anything else? I think that might be good for us to start work on this. Okay, so let's get into our surveillance component. And where do we put that? Right here. Okay, so first things first, I'm just going to copy and paste this schematic registration stuff here at the top. Okay, there it is. So let's get into initialize. First of all, just like before, we're calling reset, and since we're in reset, let's actually add the contents of reset, so we get that out of the way. We don't have to worry about it. So a couple of the things that we need to do in reset. Whenever you enter game mode, what do we want it to do? So first of all, we want to set the cam search state. We're going to set this to searching. So whenever you enter game mode, the camera is going to be searching for you. Then we want to also add the what angle or what direction do we want the rotation to go into. So for this one, we're going to make it so it's rotate. I've set it to rotate left. For that, what that also needs then is going to be, we're going to need to set that rotator and set that to -1. So once we got that out of the way, let's, just like we did with the surveillance camera component, where is it? I thought we had it right here. Yeah, the surveillance camera itself. Let's do and load the geometry. So, one thing that I missed is just the component slot. So we've just done this before. It's old news to you by now. Okay. And since we're here, let's get some of these how should I put this, quote, air quotes, copy and paste type functions. So we have the GUID, or not the GUID, but the reflect type registration function here. And let's also, since this I did a copy and paste here, this is actually not going to be C-test movements. And I'm not entirely sure why it's C-test movements, surveillance component.h. Did I just copy and paste a bunch of the stuff that I shouldn't have? I guess I did. Oh, good. So this is actually going to be C surveillance component. My bad. That's what happens, I guess, when you do copy pasting left and right. So let's update these here so that they actually reflect the work that we're doing and not something that I've done. Okay, so we have the surveillance component here, and let's go to the C++ and do a little bit of the copy and pasting, see if everything goes back in out of red, and there it is. And that should be good to go from what I can from what I can tell. Let's see, why is it complaining about this one? Oh. Okay, and we're back. So now with the proper name of these things. So we have all these kind of, let's also add this serialized contents in here. And of course I want to make this so that it's kind of reflective of what we're doing there. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's get into the kind of the meat of things. So one thing that I wanted to also paste in here is just the event mask. So into here, because again, this is just boilerplate stuff. So let's start off with the initialize. So what is going to go into our initialize? First of all, one thing that we need is we need a way to track the player, right? So in order to do that, let's go ahead and right after we do the reset, let's go into our Cgame plugin. And I'm wondering if I need to, I guess I didn't report that. So let's go ahead and I'm going to include that here. Let's see, did I put it in the header file? Let's add it right there, and let's see if we can get access to this to the game plugin. Because that's the only way that we're gonna we need to get a pointer to our player, right? So that way, whenever the player moves around, we can get its position and then orient the camera towards that. So let's see. I believe this is one of the things that I was not. I didn't add properly. So let's see, where is this? Plugin. Oh, yeah, so let's try one of the things that I did not include here in the C++, and I was kind of thinking that just that might do. Let's see if we can make it work with this. So, just can't seem to be getting access to the C game plugin. So what am I missing something when it comes to including it? And let's actually move this here and be able to look at them side by side. There's nothing that I'm missing as far as the includes, but then why can't I get a pointer to it? So what I'm trying to do is get a pointer to this, and so that way I can actually query for the player. But I'm thinking that, let's see, on client connect, on client ready for gameplay, and then see you have the C component player right here. So one thing that we do need to add in this, and I'm not sure if it's in there already. No, it's not. So I think let's take a look. That's already set to public. So one of the things that I need to add in here is a C player component pointer. Call it m_p player. So this could be useful further down the road where we need to get access to player pointer. Okay, so that is in place, but what am I missing as far as and let's also include our components and player.h. Okay, and game plugin.c++. So once we're in game plugin.c++, and I think we had that open just right here. So let's take a look and see on client connection received, which is here. Responding to the player entity, which is good. And we have P player, and I believe this should actually be that pointer of ours, but probably we don't really need it at this point. So let's see, what do we... Why can't we get access to this? This is some good troubleshooting to be done. Alright, let's take a look. What are we missing? This is, I guess, one thing that we need to get in here. So first thing, let me copy and paste this, because this might actually, you know, seeing one of the errors maybe will help us with, so it's undefined when we're trying to query the plugin, but why? So where else can we get this in? So we have all the header files. So why can't we get access to it? This is interesting. So I'm looking at my test case here, and I'm wondering about something maybe that is missing out of the game plugin.h. Let's see. Cry plugin, entity. No, everything seems to be in there. So then why can't we get a pointer to it? Well, first of all, let me, one of the things that I do have uncommented is this, or removed, because it was as protected. So let's see if I remove that. I mean, I know it's not going to go right off the bat, but I know that way at least I'm going to be able to access MP player if needed. But that still does not... Oh, I'm wondering about something else. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at our standard header here. So, one thing that I am missing in here, so we have iSystem, ICD, iSerialize. Let's also add this in here for the standard header. So let's go back to our surveillance component.c++, and still can't get a pointer to it. And that is truly interesting. Why? What else am I missing? So Pragma, module platform system, the engine serialized empty component. And that's all set. So that's reflecting what I have in my test project. But there is something else that I must be missing. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. This is this is one of those things that is a little bit annoying. So my apologies for the delay on this. I guess there's some live troubleshooting to be done. And what am I missing? This is kind of a interesting conundrum right now. I'm going to try and do something here real quick, because I believe there's something that's missing in the game plugin. So let's take a look at our and let's do the game plugin.c++ as well. This is truly daunting, I guess. I'd like to figure this out because I'd like to be able to use the player so you can see what's going on instead of using like a solid box. So I'll give this a couple of more minutes and see if I can figure out what might be missing here. So it was definitely not necessarily what was in game plugin.c++. But something else that I'm missing, and I can't seem to figure out what that would be. Now everything is in place as far as the headers. Now I'm just going to revert back to what I had because that didn't really help. Plugin, and then plugin.h, is this saved as well? Apparently it is. Well, so I'm just going to table this for now. So we'll probably do it as we'll get the functionality in place, and hopefully something kind of I can figure something out. So let's do it for maybe like a box, and we'll do it for like not necessarily an entity, but just a rigid item. So we'll attempt that first and see how the functionality works as far as tracking things. And because if we go into, and not necessarily into game mode, but that little test or like run, we can probably move things around and go from there. So let's get our functionality in place. Like I said, a couple of things that we wanted to create is our components, right? So we have, as I mentioned before, let's see, we had this here. It's m_p surveillance camera component, and what that is going to be equal to is our get entity create component class, and we're going to create a component class of C surveillance camera component. So that's going to be created and attached to our entity that we're going to drag into the world. And also to this, we're going to add an MP flashlight component. And this is going to be just like here, and get entity and then create component class. C flashlight component. Okay, so we have those created. A couple of the things that I'm just going to copy and paste is some settings that we've gone over previously for, is this how I spelled flashlight? I guess so. Flashlight, there we go. So a couple of things that I'm going to be adding is just some of the settings for the light. So whenever we initialize it, we actually just want to do set the color to white, its diffuse multiplier to 5, and then we want to enable it. A couple of the things that I realized that needed to be done is, and maybe we won't run into this, but there is an issue in the engine with some of these projectile lights. So if we take a look at our flashlight here, if you remember, we had this, it's actually commented, so it's fixed flashlight orientation to point along the forward axis. So this has to be done, says lights in the engine currently emit from the right axis for some reason, and this is a very good explanation. Hopefully they fix this. But what I ended up doing is, let me open up my flashlight here. Let's see, where is that? I've actually just commented this one out. And I'm actually just setting that in wherever I'm creating this component. So I've commented out to set solid local, and in my surveillance component where we're actually creating it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be making a little bit of use of matrices. So, you know, don't be scared by them. I mean, whenever somebody says matrix, it's like, oh my god. And I'm the same way. I mean, it's still pretty complex stuff to me. But this is pretty simple. So flashlight, if I can spell light. So I'm going to name this translation matrix. So I'm just going to create it an empty matrix. So what this is going to help me with, this is going to allow me to rotate that one flashlight component to point forward. So this is just going to be a matrix 3x4 and create identity. And what I want to do is flashlight translation matrix, and we're going to set a rotation Z to be 90 degrees. So I'm going to do, since this needs radians, I'm just going to do this little helper degree to radian, and I'm going to pass it 90 degrees. So it's, you know, I'm not working with pi and all that because I can never really understand it very well. So once we have that, let's apply it to our MP flashlight component. So we're just going to apply this to set transform matrix to flashlight transform matrix. Okay, so now one thing to pay attention is that in future releases, maybe with 5.5, if this issue is resolved, we might need to go back to this and actually fix it, because at that point probably the flashlight is going to point sideways. Okay, so now with the initialize out of the way, let's jump into our update, and that's where all the work comes in. But first, let's create a switch here. So switch and event.event. Alright, so first things first, I'm just going to do a copy and paste, because this is again just filling stuff that we've literally just gone over. Whenever we are for the entity event reset, whenever the event param 0 is set to 1, we know we've entered game mode. We set our probably these values, you don't need to set them again, but for example, let's say maybe in editor you want that thing to be white, just and then once you jump into game mode, maybe change it to yellow. So it's entirely up to you. Okay, so now we have the event reset out of the way. Let's jump in. Actually, this is actually the fun stuff. So now this is the entity underscore event update. Okay. So we'll do our quick check to see if m underscore is game mode. And then if it is, we're going to jump and actually add functionality to this. First thing that I want to do is, remember we had that timer. So we need to actually try and use frame time to calculate the timer. So in order to do that, I'm going to create a float, and this is going to be f frame time. And I'm going to get that by global environment, and then p timer, and get frame time. Okay, so now we have the frame time. Let's actually do our states. So first of all, we're going to do if m underscore cam search equals searching. That is one of them, right? Then we're going to do some stuff in here. Then we're going to have an else, right? So else if m underscore cam search, not rotate but search, if this one is equal to found, so that is when the camera actually found a player, or hopefully in our case a box, then we're going to do some work in there. One thing that we need to think about is how do we transition from these states. But let's add them all in, and then we'll go over that. So if else, and then the other one is going to be m underscore cam search equals tracking. So then we're going to do some things in there. And the last thing is going to be else, and this is else if m underscore cam search, and this is resetting. So this is where that timer comes in, where we've found a player, but it walked out of the range of the camera. So resetting, and then we do some things. Okay, so let's think about what needs to happen. So currently in this the searching state, the camera pans left and right, but what about if we found a player? So in order to do that, what we're going to check for is if m underscore p surveillance component, camera component. So what are we going to get from this? M underscore found player, right? So if that variable is true, so the ray intersected with our player, or in our case, our box. What do we want to do? We want to change the state, so cam search is going to be equal to found. So when that happens, we're going to go into the found state. So once found state is happening, at this point we want to change the light to be, flashing red and something a little bit more menacing. So let's actually, I'm just going to add the code in here. I wasn't able to figure out if there's a way to actually set these without first disabling and then enabling the camera to actually change the color, the diffuse multiplier, and the style. So I'm gonna leave this like this for now. But this is just an intermediate state. This is not going to be run every single frame. This is just used for us to set the light style. So once we go into found, we've set the light style, and then we change the state to tracking. So tracking, come on, track there. So at this point, we know that we're going to jump into the tracking state, and the camera is going to move and follow the player along. So what this is going to be, the functionality for this, and I think at this point it might be, I think we are going to need the player the player details, because and it might not necessarily be needed, but let's see how we can work this out. Okay, so maybe I'm actually thinking if you know what, I think we might not necessarily need to include that game plugin, because if you remember, in our raycast we were getting the P entity. So if we can return this, we can potentially get its position. I'm not entirely sure if that might be, because I'm not sure if this is going to be the same as the player. So let's get the functionality in place and make sure that the camera is going to be, moving left to right and all this. So we said that we were in tracking, but I think let's leave this for now, and let's do our searching, because I mean that could be, we can see how that behaves in the editor. So in searching, first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to do our little rotation states. So if m_cam rotation equals rotate left, then we know rotator is going to be equal to 1. And else, if our camera m_cam rotation is equal to rotate right, then we can set our rotator to go the other way, -1, right? So we have these in place, but now we also want to do we only want it to rotate to a certain point. So let's do an if, and we're just going to translate again with our help, or radian to degree, and we're going to get now what we want to get is the current rotation of the entity, right? So how do we get that? Well, we're going to set a quaternion here on every frame in searching. So once we're in searching, that was not the right place. So when we're in searching, we have a quat, and we're going to name this rotation So we're going to get the entity and get its rotation. There we go. And now we can pass it along and check to see rot dot get rotation z. So if that is going to be greater than, let's call it 45 degrees, then what do we want to do? We want to change its rotation to cam rotation and set that equal to rotate right. And in rotate right, we do the exact same thing. So in here, we're going to check to see if this is less than negative 45 degrees. Then we're going to change this to rotate underscore left. Okay, so with that out of the way, one thing that we need to do is we need to set that rotation so it's kind of at a steady pace. So in order to do that, what I've set up is another quaternion, which I named it as kind of a multiplier. So quat, I've named it multi. And let's see, once down here, once we know what are the value for rotator is, you know, be it rotating left, rotating right, what we're going to do is we're going to set multi to be equal to quaternion, and this is going to be made out of vector 3 of so this is just going to set the rotation. So we don't want to set it, we only want to set it around the z-axis, right? So x-axis is going to be 0, y-axis is going to be 0, and then the z-axis is going to be rotator, so be it plus or minus kter. We're going to multiply this by our frame time, and I think in my test this was moving a little too quick, so I actually multiplied by 0.2f, at least a little too quick for my needs. And once we have this, we want to modify the position of this entity. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we want to get the let's see, I think this should be it. So get entity and set the rotation to be our initial ROT and multiply it by multi, which actually will hold rotating left, rotating right. Okay, so I'm thinking at this point we can try and build this and see if once we drag the component or the entity actually into the level, we get that thing rotating around the z-axis. So let's take a quick peek at this. So let's see if we can build it and not run into any issues, because we've done quite a bit of work. And I'm not liking that one already. And let's see. I'm wondering if it's something that has to do with the game plugging, and it does. Let's take so remove some of this stuff that I've copied from my test project. So let's build this. Try building this again. Oh, it doesn't like that. And let's see, where is this at? Oh, get rotation z. That is actually a function. My bad, isn't it? There we go. So that's better. Let's try building this. And cannot open include surveillance component.c++. Where is this at? Oh, maybe this one needs to be, let's do camera. Or I think at this point actually I need to rebuild the solution, and I'm wondering if that, with doing that, maybe I'm going to be able to access the player. So let's try that out. Let's close this real quick, and here let's generate solution. And we'll take another crack at the little game plugin. Okay, so component super file is no longer having a fit. So I'm not sure if the game plugin is going to be accessible. It might still, yeah, it's still freaking out about something. Identifier is undefined, so let's build this and see if we can build this for now. Oh, that could be an issue as well. Let's build, finally. Alright, so that looks like it got built, and let's see what kind of mess did we get ourselves in here. Hopefully it's so let's look at our interactable components, and oh, I believe that I still named that as test movements. Not entirely sure why. Okay, so there's our camera. So let's kind of position it like that. And okay, so there it is. We have it's shining a light. So let's see if we play it. It's panning to the left, and then it's panning to the right. And that is actually what I've expected as far as its behavior when it's moving. Now the problem that we have is that we don't have anything to detect. So let's actually stop this. And as you can see, this is what I meant by game mode. That little m is game mode variable. You know, right now this is not doing anything, but once we jump into game mode, this thing is actually behaving as expected. If we didn't have that, this would have like panned left and right at all times. Okay, so we can stop that, and we've seen that everything is behaving correctly. I think I'm going to be ending this stream here, and I'm going to be looking into trying to figure out what's going on with this CGame plugin, and what exactly I'm missing as far as getting an access, or like accessing it. So once I figure that out, hopefully it won't take me too long. I'll resume the stream, and then I'll publish the videos to YouTube as soon as that's done. Okay, so yeah, it's already been an hour and a half, and I don't want to just sit here and try and troubleshoot some of these things and waste everybody's time. So for once I figure that out, I'm going to be coming back and showing what I had to do, and also implementing the tracking and resetting. So so yeah, again, thank you guys so much for stopping by. Apologies for this this issue with the CGame plugin, and hopefully I'll be able to return back later on today and do the rest of the stream. All right, thanks again, and we'll check in shortly.